in Western Orange, and then there's David Paganella covering the rest of Orange, and then Hannah Dallas covers the southern part of Windsor County. So, want to talk about the big trees and the champs. We did a great job talking about the program. And here are our three champs. We got the red maple, silver maple in the middle, and the basswood. And since we've done this program, I've been asked like, how old is that silver maple? And that's not an easy question. Well, there's a lot of factors in how to age a tree. The most simple way is to cut it down and count the rings, but we don't want to do that, obviously. But that's basically what we need to do to get an accurate measure is to count rings. And there's a tool called an increment bore that we use in forestry, and that's pictured here on the left. That this tool bores into a tree like you would be tapping a sugar maple, and it comes out with a little core, and you're able to count the rings that way. A tree like our silver maple, we might not get an accurate reading off of that. There could be some rot in a tree like that. There's probably multiple stems kind of growing together. So it'd be hard for us to hit the center of that tree and get an accurate representation of the rings and be able to count them. So that leaves us with some math to calculate this and kind of our known what we know about silver maples and how they grow. There's kind of three ways we can go about using different methods to age that tree. One is called the growth rate factor. Every tree species, most tree species have this, and this is just the diameter divided by the age, average throughout its species. So I looked at a U.S. Forest Service paper, and what they do is they take a bunch of trees and kind of count their rings and just average them and come up with a growth rate factor for each species. And for silver maple, that factor is 3. And you then multiply that by the diameter of our tree, which is 61 inches. So 3 times 61 is 183 years old. So that's one way to calculate the tree's age. To me, that seemed a little too old for me for what I know about silver maple, which I'll get into here in a minute. Another thing is the expected rate of growth of a tree. The same Forest Service paper on silver maple said that a silver maple can grow anywhere from a half inch to an inch a year in diameter, and up to 2 inches in one case in Vermont, I found. So if you just take those numbers, 61 inches times 0.5, you get 122 years. 61 times 1 inch is 61 years. And then if we were to go 2 inches, our tree would be much younger. It would be something like 30 years old, which I don't think that's the case. The other thing to think about with tree age is the average life expectancy for a tree. And what I found online and in this paper, I found the average age of a silver maple before it starts to senesce and decline is 130 years old. So we've got a range. And which one do we go with? And one other thing, which is great, which Sarah was able to send me some pictures of Norwich way back to 1860. So we can kind of look at, well, was there any trees around then to make it be over 150 years old? So this is Norwich in 1860. Here are cadets on the green drilling. And then we've got the Congressional Church here, which was established in 1817. I'll do my best kind of orienting us with these pictures, but Carpenter Street would be built behind this church. And there's not a whole lot there right now. This is 150 years ago, so the road's not even there. I don't see many trees, so it kind of rules out 180 years old right there. And one thing to note as we move forward here, 1860 in Vermont was the height of the merino wool boom. In 1840 to 1860 was we were more sheep than people in Vermont. 20% of the Vermont was in forest. The remaining was all cleared. 80% of the state was cleared for sheep pasture. And this is due to some tariffs on merino wool. So this is 1870s. And just, this is right at this is kind of the crash of the merino wool era here. We got the church circled. Can't really see where Carpenter Street would be. here. But one thing I love about this picture is the mountains behind. This is kind of looking southwest. Look at the hillsides here; it's like barren. The lighter colors here would be fields, and we're kind of looking towards the green. As best I can orient us here. I think this is about where the Marion Cross School is. It's a pasture. There's like this is an agricultural community with not a whole lot of forests. So as we move forward here, we're in 1890s. Um, and Norwich. This is looking towards Hanover, so we're looking to the east. A little bit better view behind the church. We may have a tree here, we may have our tree. Hard to tell. But again, we're just starting to get some ag abandonment. So some of these fields have been left barren due to what's being used as agricultural at this point is kind of the prime ag land, and the less productive lands are being abandoned, letting it go back to farms. One more picture here. This is 1910s Norwich. We're looking west toward Sharon. This is about, maybe around this time, maybe probably a little later, is maybe when where silver maple might have been planted. This is again the Congregational Church, and Carpenter Street would be back here. So we're starting to get some. We still have one other thing about this picture is there's still a lot of fields at this point in our hills. Some of the steeper land back here is returned to forest, but we still have a lot of fields over 130 years ago. So with that information and looking at the landscape, my best guess is 100 years old. So around 100. These were very commonly planted as landscape trees. So I think the best way, this is kind of almost in someone's dooryard, this tree, would to be kind of see when that house is built, and then likely they planted this tree as part of that. But just based on what we know, the average life cycle or average lifespan of silver maple is 130 years. It's doing pretty well still, so it's probably not quite at the end of its life. So I'm kind of dating it at 100 years old based on what we know. So really cool tree, really awesome that we have it and have the big silver maple in the town of Norwich. One thing I wanted to touch on was for a tree health. It's a healthy tree, and how do we know that? It looked pretty healthy this summer. And I always tell people, I get asked this a lot, and I'm not, I know enough. I'm kind of an amateur tree health expert. I know enough. I'm not an arborist. I can't really tell you what exactly is wrong with your tree, but I can kind of, there's a few things I look at when I get asked to look at someone's shade tree. And the four things to look at are the roots, branches, and foliage. And each of those things kind of tell us what's going on with the tree. I kind of joke. I have a friend who's an arborist. He always says like you deal with like overall forest health, and I'm worried about that one tree. And I always tell him like if there's a tree that's kind of sick in the woods and I'm doing some kind of management, that's a tree that's going to be removed likely. So I don't really worry about it. Either we'll cut it down or it'll turn into a snag, and which would be great. But anyways, so just digging out the roots though, compaction can affect a tree. The driveway, can affect a tree. Recent disturbance. This is a borrow pit for some mountain biking trails where you can see the exposed roots of this beech tree were definitely disturbed. Whenever I go to someone's house and there's a tree in decline, I kind of ask them, and it's close to the house, like, have you done anything to your house recently? Have you redone your driveway? You can disturb a tree's roots up to 40%, as long as nothing else is going on with it, and it should be okay once you get above that 40% threshold. You can really impact a tree's growth. And if you've got fungal fruiting bodies on the base of your tree, something's going on, decay or something. So that's not good. You don't want that. Branches, poor branch structure can be a problem with trees for tree health. This is a common thing that happens when these branches get established. There's a sharp V. What can happen with that is during the winter, there's freeze and thaw events, which kind of separate that tree and can make it split the stems. Dead branches are also a sign of tree health. I'm in the summer with looking at a tree with somebody. If I see a lot of tip die back, a lot of dead branches at the tip of a tree, that kind of keys me in that tree stressed out for whatever reason, environmental factors, a pathogen. Sometimes trees just have dead branches. It's particularly an open grown tree. And what happens as a tree matures, it shades out its own branches lower down. because those aren't as efficient anymore. They're not as good at collecting sunlight as the ones higher up, and they'll just shed those leaves, those branches. So not every time you see a dead branch, it's a bad tree. Foliage, this is a big one for me, particularly in the forest. I mean, I tell this a lot to people. If you're in July and you've got a weak, your tree's got a weak yellowish crown, really thin, there's something that tree's not happy for whatever reason. It's stressed. It's dealing with something. It should have a nice lush crown. In this ash tree over a stockbridge is a great example. You see the maples and beeches in the overstory very dark, and then you get to this ash. It's like a perfect little hole. So that ash tree is stressed for some reason. We have defoliators. This is a crabapple tree at the town office in Bethel. This is uh, euonymus caterpillar, and it looks like something from a sci-fi movie. It's just like this is all their web. They completely defoliate it. It's something that this tree is still alive. I guess it happens every year to this tree, and usually with defoliators, as long as it's happening later and it's growing in the growing season in August or later, the tree's kind of done all the photosynthesizing and energy storage it's going to do for the year. The ones that get us in trouble with or get trees in trouble are the ones that are earlier in the year. Uh, Forest tent caterpillars, a defoliator that happens in June. We had that frost event in May that affected a lot of trees. They put all this energy out to get their leaves out, and they didn't get any bang for the buck. They didn't get any energy in. Then they were able to refoliate, but say there was another defoliation event last summer, that could lead a tree down a spiral of decline and kill a tree. Lastly, the trunk. These are some extreme examples of issues with the trunk. If you've got a pileated woodpecker going after your tree, that's an issue. There's decay going on, bark splitting, and then this one on the right. If you see woodpecker flecking lately, we don't want that. That's likely AAB, and this is definitely AAB. From one of my friend's house, he sent me this picture, asked me what's wrong with this tree, and I told him to peel it, and it was EAB for sure. So if you see that in a tree, give me a call. We want to know about that. Okay, that was a quick little tree health thing, and now I'm going to shift gears and look at overall health of our forest, particularly in the Upper Valley. But I want to touch on forest succession because that's kind of a basis for some of our conditions of our current forests in the Upper Valley. So I want you to kind of envision those early pictures I showed of the agricultural Vermont, mostly clear. It looked a lot like this picture up in the upper left, mostly pasture. And what happens is those got abandoned, and our ecosystem up here wants to grow trees, doesn't want to grow grass. And pine, in particular, on pasture land has a competitive advantage against other trees to get established on grass that can deal with those drought, not quite a mineral soil. So quite a bit of our fields went to pasture as it moved along. And also what happened at this time, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, they weren't really thinking sustainably about their forest management. They were cutting for, I need fence posts, I need firewood, I need wood for my houses. So they were just kind of clearing areas and letting it regenerate. And that tends to favor more of our hardwoods because there's mineral soil exposed. And that's what our hardwoods need, that mineral soil to get exposed to kind of move forward. And each one of these scenarios kind of reaches the 20 to 40 year, what we call stem exclusion. There's way too many trees growing in this site for them to survive, but they get older. So, like here, there's probably 100 trees in this picture, at least this lower one of the hardwoods. This picture, if I come back in 80, 50 years from now, there'll probably be 3 trees there. So what's happening is it's a highly competitive time in our forest development. Trees are dying, falling out of the canopy. They're out competing each other for light and nutrients. And both, I'd say our forests in the Upper Valley are anywhere from 70 to about 120 years old, depending on its land use history. So another cool history tie here. I love the history of in general. So it's great to look at some of these older pictures. So this is 1956 up in the Upper Valley, pre-91, which is it was awesome picture. So we got just highlighted. There's our church as best I could find it. The Congregational Church, Norwich here, Hanover, White River Junction, the Lebanon Airport was established then, but there's no box stores over here yet in West Leb. It's still an ag field. The thing to point out here is still how much of our community here in the Upper Valley was open. I mean, this is Christian Street. It's hard to tell, probably hard to tell, and everybody's screaming. This is Christian Street up here. There's a power line. This is 91. Eventually, will run right through that, but this is all forested now. Uh, look at Norwich here. Lots of open fields and pasture still. This is Bragg Hill Road. There's still a lot of pasture there now, but not as much. And so, how does this compare to now? This is a photo from 2022, and we have a lot more forest now, which is great. We also, what stuck out to me more than that was the amount of homes we have and buildings. We have a lot more people living in our area than we did even 70 years ago, and that kind of that can lead to some issues of fragmentation and parcelization uh, as well. But I just the comparison is great. So this is Bragg Hill again. We still have some ag fields there, but this is that field. This is Christian Street here, and now this is all forested now. And I've been in quite a bit of this forest, and it's a mixed bag of conditions. These are the open fields down in Norwich. It's a lot of houses and back to forest again. And here are our box stores in West Lab. So what are the conditions of these forests now? Now that they've matured, they're about anywhere, like I said, to 70 to 120 years old. It's a mixed bag of things. So these are pictures from that I've taken throughout the Upper Valley of kind of the different conditions that we have out there. Some good, some not so good. We've got areas that are loaded with invasive plants. This is the town of Hartford High School owns a piece of forest off Christian Street, and this is all glossy buckthorn. It's got weevil pine and glossy buckthorn in the understory, which is not great. This is the town of Randolph owns property at their watershed, and it's probably one of the worst invasive plant infestations I've ever seen. These vines are bittersweet, and they climb up the only trees that are growing there. And as bittersweet matures, it can girdle a tree and squeeze it and kill it. And there's nothing but invasives underneath that. So this is the problem there. This is about 40 years since that's been abandoned. It was an open field, and now it's in this state. We've got those pine I talked about. This is in Royalton here. These are what we call pasture pine or open grown pine. And what happens with those is that they mature in open sunlight. We have a beetle called the white pine weevil. It's native, and it kills the terminal leader. It lays its eggs around the terminal leader, killing it. Those laterals take over, and that's why we get these crooked kind of cabbage-like pines, because they just keep getting weebled until they hit a certain height, and the weevil leaves it alone. Trees that get weevilled like that pine on its own, if it's nice and straight, no stems, is a very valuable tree forest products wise. But a tree that looks like this is not very valuable for forest products. It's also growing in a site that wants to be hardwoods. This is a sugar maple in front. This is a hardwood site, and it probably was hardwoods before it was clear for pasture. So these pine are kind of just holding this forest almost hostage to say that it's not releasing these hardwoods and slowing down the development of this forest. We also have some forests that came back great to hardwoods. Probably it's a hardwood site. Those hardwoods should be there, mix of yellow birch, sugar maple, beech. They're all represented trees that we expect to be there. But one thing to point out a lot of times is these trees came up. Remember that picture of those really tight stem exclusion trees. As they mature, it shades out the understory, and there's nothing growing in the understory for trees. And as we think of old forests and old growth forests, we had a mix of old and young trees and a lot of diversified structure. So they had a established overstory, a mid-story, and understory. At least what we call, like as foresters, age classes that are established. Our forests now are what we call like one age. They only have one dominant age class, 80 to 100 years. Maybe they have a second one just getting established in the understory. Some forests, if that were abandoned later, have a good three age classes well established. But I'd say the majority of our hardwood stands now are kind of that single age class. We also have some forest health problems now. This is beech bark disease. It's a common pathogen. It's throughout our state. It's came in from Europe on beech trees in Europe. and it's been here for 100 years, and it's pretty much just affected all our beach, and it's reduced the beach mass in a lot of places where our wildlife depend on these beach trees, and some produce mass. It's not like it used to be, and it's something we're dealing with. This is one of the many pathogens that we didn't have back when we're pre-colonial forests. And we also have emerald ash borer. This is in Pomfret. This is a tree we found in Pomfret that had emerald ash borer. And that's coming. That's on our doorstep here. It's in Hartford. It's in Plainfield, in Pomfret, and that's going to kill most of our ash trees, which is terrible. And that's really going to affect these hardwood stands that we have of a native tree, another native tree to lose. So kind of not a great picture. It's not all doom and gloom. I don't want to say that, but there are some issues that we need to face head on and be realistic about. And so I was kind of envisioning this as it's not really a solution, but it's like a path forward. How do we manage these old these what were ag lands that's now forest? What do we do? And I think engaging in active management where it makes sense. So those places that are loaded with invasive plants, we need to do something about that. That's a human-induced problem, and I think we have a responsibility to push that forest to a more natural state. Those areas that are loaded with pasture pine that shouldn't be there, we should favor the sugar maple. So we fix the problems we can, and be realistic about the outcomes. So invasive plants are a huge issue. We can try to treat them mechanically. It takes 3 county foresters here to do that sometimes, or we can use targeted herbicide where we need to. Do some active management where it makes sense. And that, active management is part of this, but I also think the most important thing we can do is keep our forests and conserve our special areas. Use the tools at our disposal, like conservation design, looking at our large forest blocks and what key parcels need to be conserved on the landscape to keep our forests and to keep these large blocks of forest intact. Parcelization and fragmentation, with the pressure in Upper Valley for people moving here and living here, there's going to be more and more pressure for housing development. So it's important to conserve where we can, and people also need a place to live. So be smart about where we're planting these areas. And that's at the landscape level, but even at the parcel level, like what makes sense to do some management in, and where should we be protecting? This is the Hartford Town Forest, and we developed a plan there. We decided we're going to protect anything that had any riparian zones. There's a block of untouched forest here. There's no mountain bike trails. We're going to keep off of it, stay away from that. There's a little area of what's turning into old forest, so we wanted to protect that too. We called it out in our plan. And these are just some special areas that need protection too. This is S3 natural community on the top of Braintree Mountain. It's a spruce montane forest, so there's no reason for us to cut 2x4s out of these special places. This is a natural community that needs to be protected along with this vernal pool. So it's kind of a any and all when we think about managing our forest in the current conditions and how we make a difference with that. So that's what I have. Tried to pack as much as I could in the time I had. So I'm going to pass it on to Linwood.
Hello. And I think, Sarah, you are handling my slides, right?
AJ is. Yep,
you're all set. Okay, all right. So my name is Linwood Andrews, and I've been on the Norwich Conservation Commission since the fall of 2017 when my husband and I moved here. And if we could have the next slide. So I thought it would be interesting for everyone to see the actual Vermont statute that describes conservation commissions in the state of Vermont. As Sarah said, ours was founded in 1974, and we think it was the first one in the state. And this is our 50th anniversary. And according to the statute, we have quite a number of powers and responsibilities. We can create inventories of the natural resources and cultural assets in Norwich. We can advise the town and town committees on land acquisition. We have a budget appropriated by the select board. We can receive gifts of money and donations of money and of land. We administer conserved town land. We can advise town boards and committees about conservation issues, and we provide educational programs. Next slide. Our current commission has 9 members, each of whom have 4-year terms. We have 2 subcommittees, the Trails Committee and the Milt Fry Nature Area Committee. The Trails Committee basically maintains the town system of trails, and they have their own website with trails and trail maps on it. They welcome volunteers to help them maintain the trails, and they generally advertise their work days on the listserv. The Milt Fry Nature Area Committee is composed of the Marion Cross School environmental learning teacher, Chrissy, and members of the Conservation Commission and neighbors. And we basically handle any concerns that come up in the Milt Fry Nature Area and work to resolve them. Our meetings are held on the 3rd Tuesday of the month at 7 p.m. We welcome the public. We now are trying to do hybrid meetings most of the time, and we meet at the Historical Society building on Main Street. We have a variety of activities. We have an article in the Norwich Times. Every issue, there's 4 issues a year. We host educational events. We're currently working on an event, hopefully a speaker on bats. We did a roadside ash tree inventory. Unfortunately, AJ let us know at our last meeting that emerald ash borer has reached Norwich. And so we really need to come to grips with that problem because it's going to be very costly. Next slide, please. We also work with the town on land conservation, and these are 2 of our most recent projects, the Woody Adams Conservation Forest, which you can see on the left, and that is a tract of land. We helped the landowner, the Adams family, sell the land to the town, so the town now owns it, and put it under conservation easement with the Upper Valley Land Trust. And the land to the immediately to the left of it is the Guile Mountain land, which is also, I believe, owned by the town and is conserved. And below it is the town forest. So that is now one complete unit that is all conserved, about 300 acres of forest in what is identified by the state as high priority forest area. The tract on the left, the Arnold property, actually it should, no, I'm sorry, I got them reversed. I'm sorry, on the left is the Arnold property and on the right is the Woody Adams. So we'll go back to the Arnold property, sorry about that. This is an example where a private property owner wished to conserve their property and worked with the Conservation Commission to get that done. Next slide, please. And so I have a few pictures from the Woody Adams Conservation Forest. The family was very interested that the land have trails for cross-country skiers. So we are working to develop those trails. And the picture on the right is a view from a high point on the Woody Adams tract. Next slide, please. Again, more pictures. The trails are being developed, so you can see one is labeled here. And very recently, Lindsay Putnam and Sayer from the Upper Valley Land Trust did a walkthrough of the Woody Adams Trail to make sure that the town was meeting the terms of the conservation easement. Next slide, please. So the Schmidt Bog Restoration Project is an example of the Conservation Commission working to administer and manage town land. And the neighbors of the Schmidt Bog, which you can see here in the middle of the map, it's close to the downtown area. Right under the legend, you can see that's Huntley Meadow. And then you have basically to the right, Main Street, and the Schmidt Bog is up there near Upper Loveland and not too far from I-91. And so the neighbors were concerned that they remembered years ago there was a lot of showy lady slipper and other bog wetland plants, and they're not there anymore, and it's been taken over mainly by buckthorn. So they've been working very hard to remove the buckthorn and hope to replant many of the native species that used to be found there. Next slide, please. We are also working to encourage better wildlife habitat, especially for species that are threatened. So we have, this year, we worked with the Richmond Middle School wood shop, and the middle schoolers there built us 11 bat houses. And on the right, you can see 2 bat houses that were erected at the Milt Fry Nature Area in the field. And we have them at a variety of other sites around town. There's one that you can see if you're coming from Hanover across the Ledyard Bridge. If you look to your right, you'll see one of our bat houses just as you reach the Norwich side. There's one at Huntley Meadow. There's one near the Pizza Oven at Barrett Park. There's one in Brookmead. And we are going to be monitoring these, and depending on where they are successful and we attract bats, we'll add more boxes. The picture on the left is a kestrel box that is at the Milt Fry Nature Area. And this is the only one that the Conservation Commission has put up, but we've encouraged people in town to install them on large fields. And the box is near where the Umpampanoosic comes into the Connecticut River. There are large fields there. They have been very successful in attracting kestrels. We are going to be installing tree frog tubes. We have to identify ponds next to which we can put the tree frog tubes, and they're basically, the frogs will climb up these PVC pipes and sit on the inside of the pipe during the day. And so people can look down in and see them. And we also, in the Milt Fry Nature Area, constructed a vernal pool and are working to establish a native planting around the vernal pool, and also in the field to establish wildflower plots. Next slide, please. So one thing that AJ didn't mention in terms of forest health from the Conservation Commission's perspective is the problem of deer browse. We feel that this is a terrible threat to forest health at this point. And we have erected 4 fenced plots that are deer exclosures to demonstrate as an educational project to the community the effect of deer on forest regeneration. It'll be a many-year project because it'll take quite a while for the area inside the plots to show growth compared to the areas outside the plots. Next slide. And again, at the Milt Fry Nature Area, we have quite a variety of projects. This is the vernal pool that we built about 2 years ago. And to our great excitement, it does completely fill with water every spring and even overflows. And this year, this spring, we did have wood frog and mole salamander eggs in the pool. So we're excited to see that they come back, hopefully, this spring. So we were worried that we would need to seed the pool with these species, but they seem to be moving in on their own. We have quite an invasive removal project, and we are always, always interested in any volunteer help to do that. Mostly we're pulling buckthorn and euonymus from the woods. We do have, unfortunately, Oriental bittersweet, and we are going to need to deal with a pretty substantial wild chervil problem that that started near the street, near Main Street, has crossed the little stream and is now moving into the field. We are also working to stabilize the stream bank. There's quite an erosion problem there. And we also support the Chrissy Morley with her environmental studies program at the Marion Cross School. They're helping me put in these wildflower plots for pollinators. The first grade in particular is very interested in getting milkweed plots for the monarch butterflies. Next slide, please. And finally, we do have a website. There are two websites. This one is the Conservation Commission's website that is not on the town website. So for whatever reason, technologically, we cannot do the kinds of things on our own website on the town one, so we had to create our own. So at any rate, the tabs that you'll see at norwichconservation.org are the projects, many of which I've just shown you, if you want to read about them some more. Any events we might be having, what the schedule is. We have the meeting date and time and agenda of our regular monthly meetings. We have copies of all of our Norwich Times articles, and then we have a tab for resources. And under the resources, we have information about how you can combat climate change. We have a lot of information on how to grow your own native plants. I don't know if you have heard of Doug Tallamy and his Homegrown National Park. He's identified what he considers to be keystone species that support insects that are most important to birds. And so I've created a list of what are the keystone species that are actually native to Norwich. And you can find that list on the website, as well as information about where to get the plants, the seeds, how to grow them. We have information about forest management, about the deer problem and how to cope with it, about the most common invasive plants that you will meet in your woods and how to deal with them. Information about living with bears. At the moment, they're hibernating, but pretty soon they're going to start coming out, and you want to get those bird feeders down so that we don't have conflicts with the bears, and your trash cans secured. We have information on pollinators and how to support them, and water conservation. So that's my information that I have for you. And please feel free to come to any meeting and let us know what you're thinking or what your questions